Welcome back to Animal Attacks. Today, we're looking at 6 fatal shark encounters across American waters. From a family sport fishing trip off the Florida Keys, where nobody could agree on what actually hit their boat, to a lone paddleboarder off Cape Cod who ignored a seal colony sitting 50 yards from where he launched. But first, we start in the Florida Keys, where a family chartered a $5 million sport fishing yacht for what was supposed to be a routine offshore trip until something far bigger than anyone expected came up from below. On July 15, 2016, off the Atlantic side of the Florida Keys, water temperatures were running a few degrees warmer than typical for midsummer, pulling baitfish schools closer to the surface and drawing larger predators into water that charter captains usually considered calm this time of year. Garrick Ashworth, 48 years old, had chartered a 78-foot sport fisher for the day, bringing along his wife Meredith, 46, and their eldest son, Talon, 21, who had flown home from college specifically for the trip they had been planning together for months. Garrick had built a shipping logistics company from almost nothing over 3 decades, and this annual offshore run had become something close to a family ritual. The one thing all 3 of them made sure to protect on the calendar, no matter how demanding work got. The captain, a longtime Keys operator who had run charters out of the same marina for over 15 years, mentioned during the ride out that baitfish schools offshore had been unusually large that week, and that a few other boats had radioed in sightings of bigger fish than normal working the same waters. He didn't frame it as anything alarming, just a passing comment meant to build excitement for the day ahead. Nobody aboard treated it as a warning.
And honestly, framed that casually, most people booking a $5 million charter would have heard it the same way, as good news rather than a red flag.
They anchored in roughly 90 feet of water to chase tuna, chumming steadily off the stern for over an hour, while Talon worked the rod closest to the transom, the position he always claimed first on these trips. He'd hooked something heavy twice already that afternoon, both times losing the fish before it ever broke the surface, the line simply going slack after a few violent seconds of resistance. He joked with his father both times about whatever kept stealing the bait clean off the hook, and Garrick joked back that it was probably just a bigger tuna outsmarting him. Meredith set further forward with a drink, occasionally glancing back and teasing Talon about his losing streak. What none of them noticed at the time, according to the captain's later statement, was that the water around the stern had gone unusually quiet, with no birds working the surface despite the steady chum slick. The captain later said it caught his attention but didn't seem unusual enough to interrupt the fishing. Looking back, it may simply have reflected the presence of a large predator moving beneath the boat, attracted not by the vessel itself, but by the concentration of baitfish, chum, and hooked fish gathering behind it. Large sharks, including great whites and tiger sharks, are well known to investigate fishing boats attracted by chum slicks, struggling fish, engine vibrations, and the activity surrounding an active fishing operation. Rather than mistaking an entire boat for prey, they typically investigate the source of food in the water, sometimes making contact with the hull or propellers while circling close beneath the vessel. Talon hooked a 3rd fish that afternoon and leaned over the transom to keep tension on the line, bracing his knee against the gunwale the same way he had throughout the day. As the fish surged beneath the stern, the line suddenly changed direction, and almost at the same moment, those on board heard and felt a heavy thud against the underside of the hull. The impact was loud enough to startle everyone nearby, causing Talon to instinctively shift his weight while he was already leaning awkwardly over the rail. He lost his footing and pitched overboard before his father, standing only a few feet away, could catch him. Garrick and the captain both reported seeing a large, dark shape, which they estimated to be well over 15 feet long, circling just beneath the surface where Talon had entered the water. Meredith screamed his name as Garrick threw a life ring toward the disturbance, while the captain immediately engaged the engines and maneuvered the boat in an effort to discourage the shark from remaining near the stern. The water became increasingly turbulent, and despite repeated passes through the area and desperate calls for Talon, he never resurfaced. The captain radioed the Coast Guard the moment it became clear Talon could not be located, but by the time a rescue helicopter reached the coordinates roughly 25 minutes later, there was nothing remaining to recover. Investigators later documented damage along the hull that was considered consistent with contact from a large marine animal, although the exact cause and species could not be conclusively determined from the available evidence. Meredith later described the incident as unfolding within only a few seconds during what had otherwise been a routine day of offshore tuna fishing. The Coast Guard found no evidence that the charter crew had violated any safety or operating procedures, and no enforcement action was taken against the vessel or its operators. I think what makes the case so difficult to process is how quickly an ordinary fishing trip turned into a tragedy, leaving almost no time for anyone on board to react.
While the Keys had claimed the Ashworth family's oldest son, the coast of California would soon show how a warning ignored for years could finally catch up with someone.
On October 3, 2014, near Santa Barbara, California, Dalton Farrow, 35, paddled out to the same reef break he had surfed nearly every single morning for 9 straight years before heading to his job as an electrician. The routine was so fixed that other regulars at the break set their own schedules around his, joking that Dalton was more reliable than the tide chart. Local lifeguard Corwin Sable knew him by name from years of overlapping early morning shifts, and had personally warned him twice that fall after 2 juvenile great whites were tagged nearby as part of an ongoing state marine tracking study, the kind of tagging program that had become more common along that stretch of coast in recent years. Dalton's response, both times, was that he had surfed through plenty of shark warnings over 9 years without so much as a scratch, and he wasn't about to break a routine that had never once let him down over a couple of tagged juveniles that biologists were simply keeping an eye on. That 9-year track record was exactly the problem, because every uneventful morning made the next warning feel a little less like it applied to him specifically. That particular morning brought clean 3-foot swell and unusually murky water caused by recent rain runoff, draining directly into the cove from the hills above. The kind of low visibility condition that reduces how clearly both surfers and sharks can identify what's moving above or below them at the surface. Corwin had actually mentioned the runoff and the murky water to Dalton on the beach that morning, on top of the shark tagging, effectively repeating a version of the same warning a third time. Dalton paddled out anyway, the same as always. Juvenile great whites frequently use near-shore Southern California waters as nursery habitat during the fall months, specifically feeding primarily on rays, small fish, and other manageable prey rather than marine mammals at that stage of their development. Attacks involving juveniles are typically investigatory in nature, amounting to a single exploratory bite rather than sustained predatory behavior. But even one brief exploratory bite from a shark already 6 to 8 feet long can cause fatal blood loss within minutes if it happens to strike a major blood vessel in the leg. Dalton was sitting upright on his board, waiting for the next set roughly 40 yards from shore, when witnesses gathered on the beach saw the water surge violently beneath him without warning. He was pulled briefly underwater, then resurfaced moments later and began paddling hard toward shore, his leg visibly bleeding steadily into the water trailing behind him. 2 other surfers nearby had seen the disturbance and paddled quickly to reach him, one grabbing his arm to help keep his head above the surface, while the other shouted repeatedly and waved toward the beach to get Corwin's attention as fast as possible. Corwin sprinted straight into the surf the moment he understood what was happening, and the group worked together to half-carry, half-drag Dalton through the shallows toward dry sand as quickly as the current allowed.
I think what gets me the most is that the shark probably wasn't even hunting him specifically. It was likely just investigating what he was.
That single bite was enough, and the third warning of the morning came about 20 minutes too late to make any difference. Corwin and the paramedics who arrived shortly after worked to control the bleeding directly on the sand, using pressure and whatever first aid equipment was immediately available, but Dalton lost consciousness before the ambulance could reach the beach access point and could not be revived despite continued efforts at the scene. The county later confirmed the presence of at least 2 tagged juvenile great whites in that immediate stretch of coastline that season. No mitigation action was taken against the local shark population, consistent with existing state policy protecting juvenile shark nursery habitat along that part of the coast.
While California had lost a man to a warning heard too many times to still register as real, Hawaii would soon show how quickly routine ocean work can turn fatal for someone who knew the water better than almost anyone else around him.
On April 22, 2015, in a channel off Maui, Hawaii, dive instructor Kalei Nahuina, 35, set out on a solo swim before his scheduled tour group was due to arrive. Part of a personal training routine he had kept up for years to stay sharp between guided dives. He had worked that same channel professionally for 8 years and told friends more than once that the resident tiger sharks were simply part of the job, rarely bothering divers who stayed calm, predictable, and confident in the water, the same way he always had. His dive shop had quietly discouraged solo swims that particular spring after 2 separate tiger shark sightings were reported the previous month by other instructors working the same stretch of reef. Sightings that had been logged in the shop's internal safety notes. Kalei brushed off the concern every time it came up in conversation, pointing out that he had swum that exact channel for years without ever having a single close call worth mentioning, and colleagues later said his confidence had only grown with each uneventful season. That morning, he entered the water alone roughly 90 minutes before his group's scheduled arrival at the dive site, planning a shark conditioning swim along the outer reef edge before switching fully into instructor mode for the rest of the day. He'd made a near identical swim at a near identical time several times that same month already. Tiger sharks are among the species most frequently linked to serious attacks recorded in Hawaiian waters, particularly within channel and river mouth areas where current patterns and runoff naturally concentrate prey activity close to shore. They are opportunistic feeders, known for investigating unfamiliar objects in the water, including swimmers and divers, and are fully capable of delivering a single powerful bite before disengaging entirely if the target doesn't match their expected prey profile closely enough. A boater heading out early for a scheduled charter reported seeing a sudden, violent disturbance in the water roughly 200 yards offshore, followed immediately by what appeared to be a large shark moving away from the immediate area. The boater changed course at once, pushing the engine as fast as the channel's current would safely allow, calling out repeatedly toward the water without receiving any response at all. By the time he finally reached the location, Kalei was unresponsive in the water with severe injuries to his lower body clearly visible just beneath the surface. Investigators believed a single tiger shark strike caused catastrophic blood loss within only a few minutes, consistent with documented channel attack patterns recorded in that same general region over previous years. I think this one's tough because he genuinely wasn't reckless. He was simply relying on years of experience and the confidence that came from doing the same swim so many times before.
The tragedy was that this particular season was different, and the area had already been flagged by people around him, including his own employer.
The boater managed to pull Kalei aboard entirely on his own, a difficult task made even harder by the severity of Kalei's injuries. Once he was safely in the boat, the boater immediately radioed for emergency assistance while heading back toward the harbor as quickly as possible. Paramedics were already waiting when they arrived, but despite their efforts, Kalei was pronounced dead shortly after reaching shore, about 20 minutes after the attack. In the investigation that followed, the dive shop confirmed that tiger sharks had been seen in the channel before the incident and that employees had been made aware of those sightings. The company also acknowledged that it had an internal safety policy advising staff not to swim alone in that area because the channel was known for regular shark activity. Even so, no legal or regulatory action was taken against the business. Investigators concluded that Calais had not been working at the time of the attack. He was off duty and had entered the water as part of his own personal swimming routine, making the decision entirely independent of his employer.
While Maui had lost an experienced diver to a channel, he genuinely believed he understood completely. The Carolina coast would soon show how quickly an ordinary family beach day could turn into tragedy without any warning at all.
On June 14, 2017, near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Weston Calloway, 41, brought his daughter Brinley, 17, out to the same stretch of coastline the family had visited together every single summer since she was a small child. The sandbar out front, basically their unofficial spot. That particular week, lifeguards had posted clear advisories about increased shark activity near that same sandbar, roughly 100 yards offshore, directly tied to a run of bait fish that had been pushed unusually close to shore following heavy storm runoff earlier that month. Weston had read the advisory posted at the beach access point on their way down to the water, but told Brinley they'd waded out to that exact sandbar dozens of times over the years without a single problem. And one printed sign wasn't going to change a family routine that had never once caused any trouble.
Brinley, for her part, didn't push back. She trusted her father's read. On the beach, they both known her entire life.
Late that afternoon, Brinley and her father waded out together toward a nearby sandbar. For most of the walk, the water remained only chest deep, making the route seem calm and manageable. But although the surface appeared peaceful, the water was still noticeably murky from runoff that had not fully cleared after the storms that had passed through the region the previous week. That storm runoff had washed sediment and organic material into the ocean, greatly reducing underwater visibility. It was the same condition county officials had specifically mentioned in the shark advisory that had been posted several days before the attack. Warning: beachgoers, that recent weather had increased the risk of shark encounters near shore. Bull sharks are among the shark species most commonly encountered in the shallow coastal waters of the southeastern United States. Unlike many other large sharks, they readily tolerate both saltwater and freshwater, and frequently move into shallow surf zones, estuaries, and river mouths, especially after periods of heavy rain. Increased runoff carries nutrients into the water and attracts schools of bait fish, creating feeding opportunities that can draw bull sharks closer to shore than usual. In murky water, bull sharks rely heavily on their electroreception and other senses to detect movement rather than clear vision. Poor visibility can make it harder for them to identify objects before investigating with a bite, particularly in shallow water where bait fish are active. Shark researchers have long noted that many bull shark incidents occur under these exact conditions, when reduced visibility and abundant prey bring both sharks and people into the same area. Brinley was standing near the outer edge of the sandbar, only a few feet away from her father at the time, when witnesses on the beach saw her suddenly cry out and stumble beneath the surface for a moment before resurfacing with a severe injury to her leg and clear distress on her face. Weston, standing only a few yards away, grabbed her under the arms immediately and began pulling her steadily back toward shore, calling out loudly for help as other beachgoers nearby noticed the commotion and rushed into the shallow water to assist him. I think what makes this one so hard is that the warning wasn't there because sharks are always around. It was there because that particular week was different. The recent storms,
the murky water, and the bait fish had all created conditions that increased the risk, and they walked past that warning anyway.
Lifeguards reached Brinley and her companion within minutes of the attack and immediately began administering first aid on the beach. They applied firm pressure to the wound in an effort to slow the severe bleeding while other responders called for paramedics. The rescue unfolded quickly, with emergency crews working continuously to keep her alive until advanced medical help arrived. When paramedics reached the scene, they immediately took over from the lifeguards and continued intensive life-saving efforts. They worked to control the bleeding and repeatedly attempted to resuscitate Brinley while emergency personnel remained around her on the beach. Despite those efforts, the injury had caused catastrophic blood loss before advanced medical care could arrive. The paramedics continued treatment for an extended period, but there were no signs of recovery. Brinley was ultimately pronounced dead at the scene. In the days that followed, county officials confirmed that a shark advisory had been posted for 4 full days before the attack, warning beachgoers that increased shark activity had been reported in the area. The advisory had remained in effect at the time of the incident, and warning signs had been placed at public beach access points. The incident was later reviewed by county authorities to determine whether any additional safety measures should have been taken. After examining the circumstances, officials concluded that existing procedures had been followed and that the advisory had been properly issued. As a result, no additional beach closures or new restrictions were introduced following the investigation.
While South Carolina had lost a teenager to a sandbar her family had trusted for years without incident, the Gulf waters of Texas would soon claim someone who never even saw the warning signs quietly building around him that entire week.
On August 9, 2013, near Corpus Christi, Texas, commercial fisherman Journey Petrakis, 39 years old, waded out onto the Gulf Flats for a weekend trip specifically targeting redfish, a personal ritual he had kept up for well over a decade to supplement his regular income between longer commercial runs out on the water. Other fishermen working those same flats that week had reported shark sightings of their own at the dock, drawn in by an unusually large mullet run, pushing steadily through the shallow water day after day, sightings that had been the main topic of conversation among the regulars for nearly a week. Journey had heard those reports secondhand, but figured any sharks moving through the area would stick closer to the deeper channel rather than venture into the shallow flats. He specifically preferred fishing, a belief that had held up for 10 years of wading the same water with a bleeding stringer at his hip. He waded out just before dusk that evening, a time of day he had always preferred for stronger redfish activity, still carrying a stringer of fish he had already caught earlier that morning, clipped securely to his belt as he moved steadily through the water. The same habit that had never once caused a problem across a decade of trips. Bull sharks are among the most common large sharks found along the Texas coast and are well known for moving into extremely shallow water while following schools of mullet and other baitfish. They are highly sensitive to the scent and vibrations of struggling fish, and a stringer of freshly caught bleeding fish attached directly to a wading angler can create a strong attractant. During an active mullet run, like the one reported that week, carrying a fish stringer at your side can significantly increase the chance of a bull shark approaching within striking distance. According to fellow fishermen who spotted him from a distance farther down the flats, Journey was standing in waist-deep water when he suddenly cried out and fell beneath the surface after being bitten. He resurfaced moments later with a devastating leg injury, visibly struggling to stay upright as the other anglers rushed toward him. The other anglers immediately began wading toward him as quickly as the soft, uneven bottom would allow, one shouting back toward shore for someone to call for emergency help, while the others pushed forward to close the remaining distance. Though the fading evening light and the distance still separating them slowed their approach considerably. Investigators later determined the stringer of fish he had been carrying likely played a direct role in drawing the shark toward him specifically, rather than the animal simply passing through the open flats on its own. I think what gets me is how ordinary it all must have felt.
He followed the same routine. He followed that same routine for 10 years. But the 1 week conditions were different, and people were already warning about sharks. Was the week it ended in tragedy.
By the time the other fishermen finally reached Journey, He had already lost consciousness from the severe blood loss caused by the attack. They rushed to his side and did everything they could to help while waiting for additional assistance, but his condition had deteriorated too quickly. The remote location and the time it took to reach him left rescuers with very little opportunity to intervene. Despite their efforts, Journey could not be revived on the shallow flats where the attack had occurred. Emergency responders later confirmed that his injuries were too severe and that he had succumbed to massive blood loss before he could be transported for further medical treatment. In the days that followed, local wildlife officials confirmed that the area had been experiencing an active mullet run, a seasonal event known to attract large numbers of sharks into the shallows. They also noted that elevated shark activity had been recorded throughout the week leading up to the incident. In response, officials issued a formal advisory recommending that anglers avoid attaching fish stringers to their bodies while wading during peak seasonal runs, reducing the risk of attracting sharks to their immediate location.
While Texas had lost a fisherman to a habit that had quietly worked for 10 straight years, the cold waters of Cape Cod would soon show that even a family, quiet coastline can turn deadly the moment a seal colony moves in nearby.
On September 21, 2018, off Cape Cod, Massachusetts, paddleboard instructor Sawyer Delacroix, 22, launched out alone for an evening paddle after finishing his last class of the day, something he did most evenings that entire summer to unwind before heading home for the night. Local officials had posted clear, prominent signage that season, specifically warning paddlers and swimmers to stay well clear of areas near a rapidly growing gray seal colony offshore, citing documented increases in great white shark activity tied directly to the seal's expanding presence. Signage that had gone up months earlier as the colony itself grew larger through the summer. Sawyer had passed that same sign dozens of times over the course of the season, close enough to touch it most days, and had gradually come to consider it aimed squarely at tourists unfamiliar with the water, not someone like him who worked that exact coastline professionally almost every single day, and considered himself able to read conditions better than a static sign ever could. That particular evening, he paddled out well past the designated swim area boundary, closer to the seal haulout than the posted advisory specifically recommended, in calm, glassy conditions that made it easy to spot marine life moving along the surface from above. Conditions he later would have described, had he been asked, as some of the best he'd seen all season, for exactly that reason. Cape Cod's great white population has grown substantially over the past decade, tracking closely alongside the steady recovery of gray seal colonies, which remain the species' primary prey source throughout that entire region. Sharks hunting near haul-out sites frequently attack from below in a rapid, decisive ambush strike, and a paddleboarder's silhouette viewed from directly underneath, arms and legs tucked in against a longboard, can closely resemble a seal resting motionless at the surface of the water. A nearby boater, returning from a fishing trip that evening, reported seeing Sawyer's board flip suddenly without warning, followed immediately by a visible disturbance in the water around him. The boater turned his vessel hard and sped toward the spot as fast as he safely could manage, cutting the engine at the last possible moment to avoid injuring anyone already in the water, then worked alone as quickly as possible to pull Sawyer aboard. By the time he was fully out of the water, Sawyer had already sustained severe injuries and was completely unresponsive to any attempt at communication.
I think this is one of the clearest examples of a warning matching exactly what happened. It wasn't a vague caution about sharks somewhere along the coast.
It was specifically about that stretch of water near the seal colony where he chose to paddle that evening. The boater managed to pull Sawyer fully aboard after the attack and immediately radioed for emergency responders while heading back toward the dock as quickly as possible. Every effort was made to reach shore without delay, with those on board doing what they could to help him during the journey back. Emergency personnel were waiting when the boat reached the dock and took over life-saving efforts immediately. Despite their attempts to revive him, Sawyer's injuries proved too severe and he was pronounced dead shortly afterward. The attack had caused catastrophic blood loss, leaving rescuers with little chance of saving him. Following the incident, state wildlife officials confirmed that great white shark activity around the nearby seal colony had remained elevated throughout the season. They renewed their advice for swimmers and paddlers to avoid the area, reminding the public that the growing seal population continued to attract large predatory sharks close to shore.